I smiled and told her to check her bank account. The color drained from Isabel's face so fast, I thought she might actually faint right there on the polished marble floor of the Sterling room. My son Marcus stood frozen beside her, confusion written all over his face. He had no idea what was about to unfold. Neither did the 75 guests gathered for what they thought was a rehearsal dinner at the Westbrook Hotel in downtown Chicago. But I knew, God help me, I knew everything. Let me back up. This story really started 3 weeks earlier, on September 8th, 2024. It was supposed to be a happy evening. My wife Catherine and I had driven into the city for what Isabel called a casual family dinner to finalize some wedding details. Marcus and Isabel had been engaged for 8 months, and the wedding was scheduled for September 28th. Everything seemed to be moving along smoothly. Too smoothly, as I'd later realize. The dinner was at Marcello's, this upscale Italian place in River North that Isabel had insisted on. She always insisted on the expensive places, but I'd chalked it up to her wanting the best for special occasions. Marcus seemed happy, and that's all that mattered to me. Or so I thought. I'm a retired attorney. Spent 35 years practicing corporate law before I hung up my briefcase 2 years ago at 60. You don't survive that long in Chicago law without developing a sixth sense for when something's off. And something about Isabel had always felt off to me, though I could never quite put my finger on what it was. She was beautiful, sure. 28 years old, blonde, worked as a marketing consultant, though I'd never been entirely clear on what that meant. She'd met Marcus at some charity gala about a year prior. He'd been smitten immediately. My son is a brilliant architect, but like a lot of brilliant people, he can be naive when it comes to matters of the heart. That September evening, about 40 minutes into dinner, my phone rang. It was my law partner of 20 years, Jim Hutchinson. He was having an emergency with a client. I'd handed off to him when I retired, and he needed some files that were apparently still in my home office. I excused myself from the table to take the call. The restaurant had a small outdoor patio area that was closed for the season, but the door was unlocked. I stepped out there for some quiet. The Chicago evening was cool, and I was standing near the back corner by some decorative hedges, talking Jim through where to find the files in my filing cabinet. That's when I heard her voice. Isabel had come outside too, but she hadn't seen me in the darkened corner. She was on her phone, speaking in hushed but animated tones. I should have announced my presence immediately. That would have been the proper thing to do, but something in her tone made me freeze. Maybe it was the lawyer in me. Maybe it was that sixth sense finally clicking into place. I held my breath and listened. "No, Emma, I'm telling you, it's all set up," Isabel was saying. "The prenup he thinks he signed? His idiot lawyer didn't catch that clause. 4B completely voids the infidelity protection. My attorney crafted it specifically to look like standard language." My blood ran cold. I pressed myself further into the shadows. "I'm getting pregnant the second we're back from the honeymoon. I've already stopped my birth control. Once there's a baby, he's locked in. And even if he tries to leave, that clause means I get half of everything, including his trust fund. Emma, that's $3 million. We're talking $1.5 million, minimum." I heard her laugh. It was a sound I'd heard dozens of times at family dinners, but now it sounded like nails on a chalkboard. "His parents are the only problem. The dad's always watching me like he doesn't trust me. But once we're married and I'm pregnant, there's nothing they can do. I'll slowly cut them out. Start with missing a few Sunday dinners, then move Marcus to the suburbs, away from their Lincoln Park neighborhood. Within a year, they'll be lucky if they see their grandkid on holidays." My hand was shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Jim was still talking in my ear, but I couldn't hear him anymore. All I could hear was this woman, this predator, calmly discussing how she was going to trap my son, steal his inheritance, and cut us out of his life. "Look, I've got to get back inside. His mother won't shut up about wedding flowers. Just have Derek ready with the paperwork. The second I'm pregnant, we're putting everything in motion. Marcus is so stupidly in love. He won't see it coming until it's too late." She hung up and went back inside. I stood there in the dark for a full 5 minutes, my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. Jim had given up trying to get my attention and hung up. I called him back, apologized, told him I'd call him later. My voice sounded strange even to my own ears. I didn't go back inside right away. I needed to think. 35 years as an attorney had taught me one crucial thing: emotional reactions get you nowhere. Evidence and strategy, those are what win cases. And this was the most important case of my life. I went back to the table, smiled, made small talk about the wedding cake flavors Catherine and Isabel were debating. I watched Isabel laugh at Marcus's jokes, touch his arm affectionately, play the role of loving fiancé with Oscar-worthy skill, and I started planning. The next morning, I called an old friend. Tony DeMarco and I had gone to law school together, but instead of practicing law, Tony had become a private investigator. He specialized in background checks for high-net-worth families, vetting potential spouses. We'd used him a few times for clients who needed pre-employment screening. "Tony, I need you to dig into someone for me," I said when I reached him. "And I need you to be thorough. Cost is not an issue." "Sure, Bobby. Who are we looking at?" "My son's fiancée, Isabel Moreau, and Tony. I need this yesterday." There was a pause. "That's serious, huh?" "That's serious. Give me 72 hours. Tony called me back in 48. What he'd found made my overheard conversation seem almost tame by comparison. Isabel Moreau wasn't even her real name. She was born Isabel Kowalski in Gary, Indiana. She'd changed her name legally 5 years ago, probably because Moreau sounded more sophisticated than Kowalski. But the name change was the least of it. "Bobby, this woman has a record," Tony told me over the phone. His voice was grim. "Wire fraud from 2019. She ran a romance scam targeting men on dating apps, convinced 3 different guys to invest in a fake startup company, made off with about 200 grand total before she got caught. She did 18 months at Danville." I felt sick. Marcus doesn't know any of this. I'm sure he doesn't. She's been careful. But there's more. I found 2 other guys, both in their 30s, both with family money. She got engaged to one in 2021, the other in 2022. Both engagements ended abruptly, and both guys refused to talk to me. But I did some digging. Both filed restraining orders against her after the breakups. Both had financial irregularities during their relationships, unexplained withdrawals, credit card charges. She's done this before, multiple times. Your son is her type, successful, nice guy, comes from money, probably a little naive about women. "Bobby, I'm sending you everything I've got. But if I were you, I'd also get a forensic accountant to check your son's finances right now." I did exactly that. Called another old colleague, Patricia Wong, who specialized in forensic accounting. What she found made me want to put my fist through a wall. Marcus had given Isabel access to one of his credit cards for wedding expenses. In the past 3 months, she'd charged $47,000. Wedding expenses typically included in that were maybe $12,000. The rest, clothing, jewelry, spa treatments, and $5,000 in wire transfers to an account registered to someone named Derek Kowalski. Her brother, I'd later learn. The same brother she'd been planning this scam with, but the real kicker was what Patricia found when she looked deeper. Marcus's trust fund, the one my father had set up for him that was worth about $3 million, had a clause that said he couldn't access the principal until he was 35 or got married. He was currently 34. The wedding would trigger full access to that money. And the prenup that Isabel had mentioned? I got a copy from Marcus's attorney, Richard Shea. Richard was a good real estate lawyer, but he didn't specialize in family law. He'd done the prenup as a favor to Marcus. And sure enough, there it was, Clause 4B, buried in page 7 of 12, in language so dense and convoluted that it essentially voided the entire prenup in the event of marital discord, stemming from actions taken prior to the dissolution filing. I'm a corporate attorney, not a family law specialist. But even I could see what Isabel's lawyer had done. That language was so vague it could mean anything. Any decent divorce attorney could argue that Marcus's actions, whatever they were, had caused the marital discord, thus voiding the prenup and entitling Isabel to half of everything. It was brilliant, in the most evil way possible. I sat in my home office, surrounded by documents and evidence, And I realized something. I couldn't just tell Marcus. He was in love. He wouldn't believe me. He'd think I was being an overprotective father who'd never thought anyone was good enough for his son. Isabel would cry, play the victim, probably even turn it around and accuse me of trying to sabotage their happiness. Marcus would be forced to choose between his father and the woman he loved, and I'd probably lose. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed Isabel to expose herself. I needed Marcus to see who she really was with his own eyes, in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. I needed a plan. Over the next week, I put together what my wife Catherine later called the most elaborate sting operation outside of FBI headquarters. And she wasn't entirely wrong. Step 1 was getting Marcus to trust me with more wedding details. I called him up, apologized for being a bit distant about the wedding planning, told him I wanted to be more involved. He was thrilled. Isabel was less thrilled, but she played along. I offered to help with some of the vendor payments, said I'd wire money directly to save them the hassle. Step 2 was the vendors themselves. I contacted several of them, the ones Isabel claimed she'd already paid. Surprise, surprise. Most of them had only received deposits, if that. The florist hadn't been paid at all. The photographer had gotten one payment and was owed another $3,000. The caterer had received about half of what was owed. I paid them, all of them, but I also asked them to do me a favor. If Isabel contacted them about payment, could they tell her there was a problem with her credit card and they needed payment in cash or check? Every single vendor agreed. They'd all dealt with bridezillas before, but there was something about Isabel that had rubbed each of them the wrong way too. Step 3 was the hardest. I needed to turn someone in Isabel's circle. I needed an inside person. I went back to Tony. Can you find out more about this Derek Kowalski? He called me back 6 hours later. Brother, age 32, lives in Evanston. Works as a business consultant, which is code for unemployed con artist. He's got a record too. Fraud, identity theft. Did 2 years in Stateville. Currently on probation. Perfect. I need to meet with his probation officer. Bobby, what are you planning? Something that's either going to save my son or destroy my relationship with him forever. Through some very careful legal maneuvering and a few favors called in, I managed to have a conversation with Derek Kowalski's probation officer, a tired-looking woman named Martha Simmons. I explained the situation. I showed her the evidence Tony had compiled. If Derek is involved in another fraud scheme, that's a violation of his probation, she said carefully. What if Derek were to cooperate? What if he provided information about the scheme before it was completed? Martha studied me for a long moment. Are you asking me if cooperating with authorities could work in Derek's favor? I'm asking hypothetically. She smiled, just a little. Hypothetically, yes, cooperation is always viewed favorably. It took 2 more meetings, but we got Derek on board. Turns out he wasn't the criminal mastermind. That was all Isabel. He was just a weak-willed little brother who'd been following his sister's orders his whole life. When faced with the choice between going back to prison or helping us stop Isabel, he chose the latter. She's done this 4 times now, Derek told me in a coffee shop in Evanston, his hands shaking as he held his cup. I helped her with the last 3. I'm not proud of it, but she's my sister. And she convinced me these guys deserved it because they came from rich families. I don't know. I was stupid. You're making a smarter choice now, I told him. Derek told me everything. The whole plan, in detail. How Isabel had targeted Marcus specifically after seeing his name in a Chicago Tribune article about emerging architects. How she'd engineered their chance meeting at the charity gala. How she'd researched his family, his finances, his personality. How she'd crafted every moment of their relationship to make him fall in love with her. It was sociopathic in its calculation. But Derek also gave me something more valuable. He agreed to wear a wire. The next part of my plan required convincing Isabel that there was an urgent problem with the wedding finances. I had Patricia, my forensic accountant, call Isabel from a spoofed number that appeared to be from Marcus's bank. Miss Moreau, this is Patricia Wong from First Chicago Bank's fraud department. We've detected some unusual activity on the account ending in 7,743. We need you to come in to verify some transactions, or we'll have to freeze the account pending investigation. I listened to the call on speaker. Isabel's voice went from confident to panicked in about 3 seconds. What kind of unusual activity? I'm authorized on that account. I can't discuss specifics over the phone, ma'am, but I can tell you that there are several large transactions that have been flagged. We need you to come in tomorrow at 2 p.m. to verify your identity and the legitimacy of these charges. After Isabel hung up, she immediately called Derek. We've got a problem, she said. The bank is looking at the credit card. Maybe we should pull back, Derek suggested, following the script we'd given him. Maybe this is too risky. No, we're too close. I just need to move up the timeline. I'll tell Marcus I want to elope. We'll fly to Vegas this weekend, get married, and once the trust fund transfers, none of this matters. Derek played his part perfectly. Are you sure? What about his parents? Screw his parents. Once I'm Marcus's wife and I'm pregnant, they can't do anything. This is happening, Derek. This weekend. We had it all on tape. That's when I brought in the final piece of my plan. Marcus himself. This was the part I'd been dreading. I called Marcus and asked him to meet me at my office. I still kept a small office downtown for consulting work, even though I'd retired. He arrived looking confused but happy. What's up, Dad? I gestured for him to sit down. Then I played him the recording of Isabel's phone call from the restaurant, the one I'd recorded on my phone. Marcus's face went through about 5 different emotions as he listened. Confusion, disbelief, denial, horror, and finally, devastation. No, he said when it finished. No, that's not. There has to be an explanation. There is an explanation, son. I spread out all the documents on my desk. The explanation is that Isabel is a con artist. She's done this before, multiple times. I spent the next hour showing him everything. Tony's background report, the prison record, the previous engagements, the financial analysis showing how much she'd stolen, the prenup clause, Derek's testimony, the recordings. By the end of it, Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years. He sat there, staring at the documents, and I watched my son's heart break in real time. I loved her, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. I was going to marry her. I know, son, and I'm so sorry. Why would she do this? Why me? Because you're a good person, because you come from a family with means, because you trusted her, and she saw that as a weakness to exploit. I reached across the desk and gripped his hand. None of this is your fault. Marcus looked up at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. What do I do now? Now? I leaned back in my chair. Now we make sure she never does this to anyone else. Over the next few days, Marcus and I worked together. It wasn't just about protecting him anymore. It was about justice. We coordinated with the Chicago Police Department's fraud division. We had Derek continue to play his part, gathering more evidence. We had Marcus act completely normal around Isabel, which nearly killed him, but he managed it. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for September 27th, the night before the wedding. It was being held at the Westbrook Hotel in the Sterling Room, a gorgeous space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. Isabel had invited 75 people, our family, her family, mostly Derek and some friends, playing roles, and various people from Marcus's architecture firm. I paid for all of it, every cent. The dinner was costing about $15,000. Consider it an investment in my son's future. The morning of the rehearsal dinner, Detective Linda Ramirez from CPD's fraud division called me. We're ready. We'll have plainclothes officers stationed around the venue. The moment you give the signal, we move in. Thank you, Detective. Mr. Brennan, I have to ask, are you sure you want to do this at the rehearsal dinner? We could arrest her quietly, spare your son the public scene. No, I said firmly. She was planning to humiliate my son in front of everyone by trapping him in a fraudulent marriage. She deserves the same treatment in return. That evening, as guests began arriving at the Sterling Room, I felt remarkably calm. Catherine was beside me, looking beautiful in a navy dress. She knew the entire plan. She'd been horrified, heartbroken for Marcus, but she'd supported every step. Are you sure about this? She whispered to me as we watched Isabel work the room, playing the happy bride-to-be. I've never been more sure of anything. Marcus arrived with Isabel. He looked pale, but composed. We'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times. He squeezed my hand as he passed, a silent communication between father and son. The dinner proceeded normally at first. Salads were served. Champagne was poured. I stood up to give a toast. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "Tomorrow, my son Marcus is supposed to marry Isabel. It's every father's dream to see his son find happiness." Isabel was beaming at me. She had no idea what was coming. "But before we celebrate, I think there's something everyone should know about the bride." The room went quiet. Isabel's smile faltered slightly. I pulled out a small remote and clicked it. On the screen we'd set up for the rehearsal slideshow, a different image appeared. Isabel's mugshot from 2019. This is Isabel Kowalski. She served 18 months in federal prison for wire fraud. She ran a romance scam targeting multiple men, stealing over $200,000. Gasps rippled through the room. Isabel stood up, her face going red. "What the hell are you doing?" "I'm protecting my son," I said calmly. I clicked the remote again. This is a recording of a conversation Isabel had 3 weeks ago, discussing her plan to trap Marcus, steal his trust fund, and isolate him from his family. I played the audio. Her voice filled the room. Every damning word. Isabel started backing toward the door. "You're insane. This is fake. Marcus, tell him to stop." Marcus stood up slowly. He looked at her with an expression I hope I never see on my son's face again. Complete and utter betrayal. "Is it fake, Isabel? Or should I call you Isabel Kowalski?" She turned to run, but Detective Ramirez and 2 other officers were blocking the exit. "Isabel Kowalski, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and violation of supervised release terms for Derek Kowalski, who is cooperating with authorities." That's when I turned to her and smiled. "You should probably check your bank account. That money you transferred to Derek, he transferred it back this morning. All of it. $47,000. Consider it our wedding gift." The color drained from her face. She looked at Derek, who was standing near the back of the room. He couldn't meet her eyes. "You," she hissed at him. "You betrayed me." "No," Derek said quietly. "I stopped helping you hurt people. They took her away in handcuffs." The room was dead silent except for the sound of her screaming obscenities at me, at Marcus, at Derek, at everyone. After she was gone, I addressed the shocked guests. "I apologize for the disruption. There will be no wedding tomorrow. But please, stay. Enjoy the meal we've prepared. It's already paid for." About half the guests left. The other half stayed, too stunned to do anything else. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair. Catherine wrapped her arms around him. He started crying, right there in front of everyone, and I don't think anyone judged him for it. I sat down next to my son. "It's over. She can't hurt you anymore." "Dad," he said, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. Why did you?" "Because you're my son, and I'll always protect you." The aftermath was messy, as these things always are. Isabel was charged with multiple counts of fraud. The prenup irregularities, combined with her criminal history and the recorded evidence, made it an easy case for prosecutors. She eventually took a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison. Derek got 18 months, mostly time served from a previous sentence, plus probation. He's apparently doing better now. Got a real job, working in construction. Sometimes people can change, I guess. Marcus went through hell. He took a month off work, saw a therapist 3 times a week. There were days when he didn't get out of bed. Catherine and I took turns checking on him, bringing him food, just sitting with him. "I feel like such an idiot," he told me one afternoon, about 2 months after the rehearsal dinner. We were sitting in my study, watching a Bears game neither of us was really paying attention to. "You're not an idiot. You're a good person who wanted to see the good in someone else. That's not a character flaw, Marcus. That's what makes you human. But I should have seen the signs. I should have known. Maybe. But that's the thing about con artists. They're good at what they do. That's why they're called confidence artists. They make you confident in them." I turned to face him. "What happened to you wasn't your fault. It was hers. All of it." He nodded slowly. How did you know, Dad? What made you suspicious? I thought about that for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe it was just instinct. Or maybe it was because I love you, and some part of me couldn't believe that someone could love you the way she claimed to and still be planning to hurt you. Real love doesn't come with ulterior motives. I don't think I'm ever going to trust anyone again. You will, I assured him. It's going to take time, but you will. And when you do meet someone real, someone genuine, you're going to appreciate them so much more. He gave me a weak smile. How'd you get so wise? 62 years of making mistakes and learning from them. It's been about 4 months now since that night at the Westbrook Hotel. Marcus is doing better. He's back at work, throwing himself into his projects. He's dating someone new, actually. A woman named Sarah, who's a structural engineer at a rival firm. They met at a professional conference. She's nothing like Isabel. Down to earth, smart, has her own money and career. When Marcus introduced us last week, she shook my hand and said, Mr. Brennan, I've heard a lot about you. Thank you for protecting him. I liked her immediately. Last week, I got a call from Detective Ramirez. Mr. Brennan, I thought you'd want to know. We've identified 2 other men who were scammed by Isabel Kowalski. Both in Chicago, both in the past 6 years. They're both willing to testify at her trial. Good, I said. Maybe this will give them some closure too. You did a good thing, she said. Not everyone would have had the patience to build a case like this. Most people would have just confronted her directly. I'm a lawyer, I told her. We don't confront, we build cases. She laughed. Well, you built a hell of a case. I think about that night often. Was it an overreaction? Was it too elaborate? Did I traumatize my son by making him go through with the rehearsal dinner plan instead of just canceling the wedding quietly? That comment from @RevengeRoomM7L that I saw later on a YouTube video about our situation actually made me think. At what point did protection become revenge? The truth is, I don't know. Maybe it was both. Maybe I did want revenge on Isabel for what she'd planned to do to my son. Maybe I wanted her to feel the same humiliation she'd been planning to inflict. Maybe that makes me a bad person. But I also know this. If I hadn't done it the way I did, Isabel might have gotten away with it. She might have married Marcus, gotten pregnant, stolen his money, and destroyed his life. She might have moved on to the next victim after that. By exposing her publicly, by building an ironclad case, by getting her sent to prison, I didn't just protect Marcus. I protected everyone else she might have targeted. So was it too much? Maybe. But I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Marcus knows the whole story now. I showed him the analysis someone did of the case, including that comment questioning whether I'd gone too far. He read it carefully, then looked at me. Dad, you saved my life. I don't care if it was over the top. I don't care if it was elaborate. You saw something I couldn't see, and you did what needed to be done to protect me. That's all that matters. Even though it hurt? Especially because it hurt. If you'd just told me, I wouldn't have believed you. I needed to see it for myself. And yeah, it destroyed me. But it also woke me up. I'll never be that naive again. Catherine and I hosted Sunday dinner last week. Marcus came with Sarah. Derek Kowalski actually showed up too, which surprised me. He's been staying in touch. Says he owes us for giving him a chance to turn his life around. As we sat around the table, eating Catherine's pot roast and talking about everything and nothing, I looked at Marcus. Really looked at him. He was laughing at something Sarah said, his eyes bright again, the color back in his face. He looked like my son again, not the shell of a person he'd been in those dark months after Isabel. And I realized something. Sometimes protecting the people you love requires you to do things that seem extreme to everyone else. Sometimes it requires careful planning, strategic thinking, and yes, maybe a little bit of calculated revenge. Because at the end of the day, love isn't just about the good times and the happy moments. Love is also about standing in the shadows at a restaurant, listening to a conversation that breaks your heart, and then spending 3 weeks building a legal case instead of just punching someone in the face like you want to. Love is about watching your son's heart break and knowing that you're the one who had to break it to save him. Love is about being willing to be seen as the bad guy, the overprotective father, the one who ruined the wedding, if it means your child is safe. I'm 62 years old. I've practiced law for 35 years. I've won cases and lost cases. I've made money and spent money. I've had successes and failures. But stopping Isabel Kowalski from destroying my son? That's the case I'm most proud of. If you've ever had to protect someone you love from a predator, you know what I'm talking about. You know that sometimes being a protector means being a fighter. And you know that no matter what anyone else thinks, no matter how elaborate your plan seems to outsiders, it's worth it if it keeps your loved ones safe. Someone asked me last week if I have any regrets about how it all went down. I thought about it for a long time before answering. Only one, I finally said. I regret not trusting my instincts sooner. I knew something was off about Isabel from the beginning. I should have investigated earlier, but that's the thing about hindsight. It's always crystal clear. What matters is that when I finally did see the threat, I didn't hesitate. I didn't second-guess myself. I did what needed to be done. And Marcus is safe. That's all that matters. If you're reading this because something similar happened to you, or because you're worried about someone you love being taken advantage of, let me give you some advice. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't talk yourself out of your concerns just because everyone else seems to think everything is fine. And if you discover that your fears are real, don't just confront the person directly. Build a case, gather evidence, work with professionals. Make sure that when you expose the truth, it's undeniable, because the people who prey on others are experts at manipulation. They'll twist the truth, play the victim, and make you look like the crazy one if you give them the chance. Don't give them that chance. Marcus is getting serious with Sarah. I can see it in the way he looks at her, the way he talks about her. It's different from how he was with Isabel. Less desperate, more grounded. He's taking his time, being smart, but he's also opening his heart again. Last Sunday, as everyone was leaving after dinner, Sarah pulled me aside. "Mr. Brennan, can I ask you something?" "Of course. And please, call me Robert. How did you know to investigate Isabel? What was the thing that made you suspicious?" I thought about that. Honestly, I don't think it was any one thing. It was more like she was too perfect, too agreeable, too accommodating, too interested in every little detail of our family finances, while pretending she wasn't. And I think, on some level, I couldn't understand what she saw in Marcus. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Marcus is a wonderful man, but he's also a bit nerdy, a bit awkward, more interested in structural integrity than social media. Isabel was this glamorous woman who could have dated anyone. Why him?" And the answer, I realized, was because of what he represented: access to money and a trusting nature. She didn't love him. She loved what he could give her. Sarah nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I love him because he's nerdy and awkward. I love that he gets excited about load-bearing walls and architectural history. I love that he's kind and trusting." I smiled. "I know you do. That's why I like you." She hesitated, then said, "I want you to know, I have no ulterior motives. I have my own career, my own savings, my own life. I'm with Marcus because he makes me laugh, and because I admire how he's rebuilt himself after everything that happened." "I know that too," I said gently. "But thank you for saying it." She gave me a hug before leaving, and I realized that Marcus was going to be okay. Better than okay. He'd been through hell and come out stronger. That's the part they don't show you in movies. They show the revenge, the confrontation, the dramatic moment. But they don't show the aftermath, the healing, the slow rebuilding of trust and self-worth. They don't show the quiet Sunday dinners where you realize that your child has finally started to smile again. They don't show the phone calls where they tell you about someone new they're dating, and you can hear the hope in their voice again. They don't show the moment when you realize that the nightmare is really, truly over. But those are the moments that matter. I'm not a hero. I'm just a father who saw his son in danger and did what any parent would do. Or at least, what I hope any parent would do. I protected him. I fought for him. I made sure that the person who tried to hurt him paid the price. And If that makes me overprotective, or vindictive, or too elaborate in my planning, then so be it. I'll wear those labels proudly if it means my son is safe and has the chance to find real love with someone who deserves him. The Westbrook Hotel still sends me mail sometimes. Special event packages, promotional materials. I think about that night every time I see their logo. The Sterling Room, the shocked faces of the guests, Isabel's rage as she was led away in handcuffs. But mostly, I think about Marcus sitting there, crying, with his mother's arms around him. That image is seared into my memory. The moment when everything he believed about his relationship crumbled, when he had to face the fact that someone he loved had been lying to him from day one. That's the price of protection. Sometimes you have to hurt the people you love in order to save them. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but I'd do it again. 1,000 times over, I'd do it again. Because that's what love is. Not the fairy tale version where everyone is happy all the time. The real version, where you make hard choices and live with the consequences, because the alternative, letting your loved one walk into disaster, is unthinkable. I'm Robert Brennan. I'm 62 years old. I'm a retired attorney, a husband, a father. And I'm the man who stopped Isabel Kowalski from destroying my son. That's my story. That's my truth. And I'm at peace with it.